Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for our Zoom panel with Greg Deal and our illustrious artist of Indigenous Voices. Greg, I think, take it away. Our curator of the exhibition. Greg's a fantastic artist and an activist as well, and a musician. He's a jack of all trades, a Renaissance man, and we're so happy to have him and the exhibition that he put together for the museum.
Thanks, Lisa. Appreciate it. Amo, no Greg Deal, Mina Nea, no Kiyo Itakara, no Kumo, no Naa, no Tubudu, no Gubatu Yarawara. My name is Greg. I am a husband and a father, an artist, a maker of things, disruptor of spaces, and I'm grateful to be here. I'm the curator of Indigenous Voices, contemporary art exhibition. Wanted to just give a little context to this. I know some folks were at opening night, but it doesn't hurt to bring this home. If we're all in Colorado, of course, we are on the traditional homelands of the Cheyenne, the Arapaho, and the Ute, depending on where you're at in Colorado. We recognize that because the lands that we're on, and this is a nice statement for Native American Heritage Month, but the lands that we're on are oftentimes lands that are unceded, lands that were taken or stolen or coerced under treaties, and oftentimes lands that were taken sort of during mostly during the westward expansion, or what has oftentimes been called manifest destiny. Colorado itself is a vibrant land for indigenous peoples, and you'll find that there is one reservation in this state, and it is in southern Colorado. And so it's interesting to sort of mention that and to recognize that Denver is traditionally was a large hub of trading, not just for the communities that I mentioned, but for multiple communities that would make their way to the base of the mountain for trade and for interaction. Why this matters is because Indigenous people as a whole are in an interesting predicament in the United States. In the United States, about 40% of non-native people believe Indigenous people to be extinct and to no longer exist, which is an insane number that has a lot to do with education or a lack thereof, as well as the context of Indigenous people as we exist on these, our homelands, for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. This show is meant to play within the bounds of understanding that Indigenous representation matters. The statement that I had written was saying just that, giving any community an opportunity to see work from a community they may not know much about helps not only expand that understanding, but enrich the visual language that accompanies that community. Indigenous Voices is meant to be an exhibition that showcases local Colorado contemporary artists, their work, and their voices, giving insight into the rich tapestry of ideas that come through modern art by living artists who are also Indigenous. This is a really important distinction, by the way. We are not Native artists. We are artists that happen to be Native. Our perspective is rooted in our life experience and in the way in which we see the world. I remember I was doing an exhibition at the Smithsonian in 2016 and had a reporter talk to me, and she said, "So you're an Indigenous artist?" And I knew exactly what she was saying the moment that she said it. And I said, "Well, what do you mean?" Trying to make her, trying to expand what she was saying. And she said, "Well, that means that you show your work down in Santa Fe." I said, "I've never shown my work down in Santa Fe. There's an art market in Santa Fe for those that are not aware." And she said, "But you would be an Indigenous artist." And I asked her, when she speaks to white Americans, if she refers to them as Euro-American artists. And she said, "Of course not." And she's answering her own question, and she's giving insight, but it speaks to the systemic nature of the language that we use as artists, people who create. We are given the viewpoint of our experience, our identity, our communities, and our families. And that is what you see within our work. And I want to make that distinction for all of you so that you can look at us not as a commodity, this oddity that exists as Native artists, but as human beings that are expressing ourselves through our experience as Native peoples from our various communities and places, which, by the way, is as varying as the very world that we live in, from the way that we look to the experiences that we have to the places that we live. Politically, cultural, social, and artistically driven Indigenous voices showcases artists that embody possibility through the art they create. Indigenous art is nothing new. And because it's nothing new, it puts us in a unique position because it is actually new to a lot of people. But during the abstract expressionist movement, there was a number of artists that were working within that as artists that a lot of people didn't necessarily know that they were Indigenous. Obviously, social media plays a really big part in being able to identify people, what they look like, where they're from, so on and so forth. Fritz Scholder is a Luiseño artist that was working in the abstract expressionist movement. He's a really good example of an artist that was sort of existing in plain sight and was part of an incredible movement that was looking at his work as an abstract expressionist and not necessarily as an Indigenous person. George Morrison is another one that was actually wore his nativeness very much on his face. But again, because of information, he was part of a movement that people didn't really understand or know was part of that movement, and also an incredibly massive influence on Native artists that were coming out of schools in Santa Fe, New Mexico. That means that we've been around this whole time, but the idea of our voices, the way that we emote our work, the way in which that context of that work exists, ends up being so different and so varying. In fact, I know for myself, as somebody who's been working as an artist for over 20 years professionally, I can tell you that when I went to college, I wasn't really sure of contemporary art as a medium for an artist, and it was something that I could actually do. I was introduced to other artists that were doing that type of work, and it began to form ideas in my mind of like what that is. What is contemporary art? How does contemporary art inform my practice? What does it look like? And then, of course, down the rabbit hole you go of like, what is high art? What is gallery art? What is museum art? What is the different styles in which we're looking at, especially in this day and age with social media? It feeds into no particular or specific art movement like abstract expressionism, but ends up going a myriad of different ways, which is both confusing and saturated, but also really exciting because sky's the limit on what you can do. I found my way through performance art, as have a number of the artists that are here, and have also found my way through traditional arts. I was trained in painting. But the way in which we present to each other and the work that we do that young people see also ends up feeding into how they are able to see the world. We end up going through the things that we go through, and young people end up not having to go through quite the same thing because we've already done it. And the work becomes more rich, the voices become more aware of your surroundings. The strength of voice ends up coming through in ways that are just absolutely incredible. So a big part of my effort in curating this was to bring in some artists that are established, like myself and Stephen Yazzie, to bring in some artists that are sort of mid-career, known particularly in Colorado and doing good work and have consistently been doing good work, to emerging artists that are coming up behind us, taking upon themselves the mantle that hopefully we've created to be sustainable enough for them to stand on, and also doing better than us. The goal is for us older artists is, yes, we're going to create work. Yes, we want to create work, but ultimately we want to create something where it allows younger people to come up behind us and make work that's better than what we're making. My oldest kid, Sage, is here, and I've told Sage this their whole life, that my hope is that Sage does better than I do in everything, because it's not ultimately about ego. It's not about being the best in the room. All boats rise with the tide. It's about having the opportunity to share and to create and to have voice, and for that voice to be heard. And hopefully we create something with this show that allows us to be able to take those necessary steps, both in Fort Collins as well as in Colorado as a whole. I'm going to share a couple of things of my work really quick, just to kind of give some context to that. And then we're going to jump right into the list. We're going in alphabetical order. So it seems super self-serving, and I promise it's not. Sage is after me. And then we're going to go to Diego from there. And then we'll get to that point and we'll just keep on. So I'm classically trained in painting. I have also been exposed to performance art. Performance art ultimately is what put me on sort of a national stage with my work. This is my very first performance art piece called The Last American Indian on Earth. It's meant to showcase stereotype and taking it into public, and ultimately exploiting the ignorance of as of passersby, as of Americans, as they see this. This photograph is not staged. This gentleman wanted to take a picture with me in the sculpture garden in Washington, D.C., as part of the Smithsonian, and he wanted to point at his Cleveland Indians hat. What I'm wearing in this is everything is contrived. It's not real. It's store-bought. It comes from kits, which Boy Scouts do a lot of that crap. But even the headdress is made in China, with beadworks assembled by Chinese folks. The Last American Indian on Earth is meant to be tongue-in-cheek, and it's meant to be exploitive of the way that Americans not only view us, but the ignorance that goes into it, not knowing that what I'm wearing is contrived. But I've found through my performance art that presence has an enormous amount of power within the performance art medium. This is called its existence as protest. I'm doing it with a fellow artist, Aneta Yo Ali, who is a Cambodian Muslim. And we had this moment that we shared in her space, surrounded by 100 American flags in Washington, D.C., as part of a Smithsonian show in 2016. An image like this is interesting because there's a shared experience despite the many years that are between our shared experience. In 2016, there was a candidate running for a president, and he was in his vitriol demonizing Muslim Americans. And Anita had this incredible piece. It was asking the question, can a Muslim American be a patriot? When you stand us together, you have two individuals from two different groups that are having a shared experience under this symbol of the American flag. So we titled it Existence as Protest. It lasted 6 minutes before I was forcibly removed from the stage, a story for a different time. Invisible Loss Movement is a piece that I had created based around powwow dance. Specifically, I'm wearing a men's Northern traditional outfit. The individual with me is Sage, when I think Sage was 12 or 13, doing a jingle dress dance. And this was a performance piece, not a ceremonial piece, as interestingly enough, a lot of people treated it. It was a piece informed by powwow culture and by indigenous culture. And what we did in this is we existed in this space in these black outfits, with black beadwork and black ribbon work and black leather work. And even you can see, even in the sunlight, it's hard to see anything. We are a metaphor for a shadow. The line that I had said with this is that we exist, but we don't exist. We're here, but we're not here. We are seen, but we are not seen. And this is something that we did where we actually danced in silence. Sage and I both had wireless headphones so we could hear the dance and we could dance together or separately. The viewing public couldn't see us, couldn't hear anything. They could only see us dancing. This idea of presence is really what this is about, and ends up being a pretty important aspect of the performance process. We did another version of it. We just called it Invisible. Sage had outgrown the outfit that I had made for them. And in this one, we're concentrating on the names of missing and murdered Indigenous relatives. And Sage is reading that. I'm hitting a hand drum that is following a heartbeat as we read these names downtown in downtown Denver on this plinth. The power of presence is not just about outfits and it's not just about dress. It's also about the words that come out of your mouth. It's also about the sounds that you make when you make them. Invisible Eulogy sort of following the same concepts, using spoken word and sound to take over spaces. I've done a lot of mural work. This is off of Broadway. It's the Skylark, concentrating on presence. This is in downtown Colorado Springs. Yes, that is Sage. Sage has been somebody present in my work for more or less the whole of their life. And this piece in downtown Colorado Springs is kind of an incredible piece, an incredible opportunity. And honestly, when we had created it, Sage helped me paint it. When I had created it, I don't know that it would have had the sort of reaction and interaction that it's had. In 5 years, this piece has never been touched. Nobody has tagged on it. Nobody has touched it. It is 80 feet tall, sitting downtown Colorado Springs. Pretty cool. Murals end up being this interesting thing about putting art in public. I'm a big fan of it. But a lot of times that work also transitions into other pieces like paintings. This series was a series where I've reappropriated old comic book images and have taken away the dialogue and added dialogue from punk rock songs. This is from a Clash song called "I'm So Bored with the USA." So technically, I'm not saying that I'm so bored with the USA. It is Joe Strummer. But I wanted to show these pieces because really there is a power of presence. This should be the last image. And this is a piece that I did in Carson City, Nevada. My tribe is or our tribe, Sages here, is about 30 miles away from here. And this is actually a relative of mine. Her name is Datsola Lee. She is Washoe, which is a indigenous community that is in our bloodline. And I'm pointing this out because not only did I have an opportunity to paint the picture of this incredible basket maker, but I did it on the side of a state museum in a state that has had a pretty difficult relationship with its tribal nations. That is an actual image of Datsola Lee. Those are her baskets. She really informed and influenced an industry of basket making. Her baskets are on the open market still to this day, and they run for anywhere between $1 to $2 million a piece. Pretty incredible. And so I had an opportunity to do this piece, but I have to point out how moving it is to be able to create an image of a relative in the state that my people come from, 30 miles from our homelands, near the homelands of the Washoe, of which she was a part of. And to have this setup with, these basket patterns that are behind her that are part of the basket patterns that she has made in her work, and just how incredibly powerful it is. And I just found out that my cousin did a mural to the right of the screen here on the other side of those doors, who's also a member of the Pyramid Lake Paiute tribe, and so it just keeps going, and it's just a really awesome thing. That's a photograph of me holding a $1.5 million basket with the exact pattern on it that is on the original, that's on the mural. It's an incredible thing, history, and the way in which history has informed not only the way that we see ourselves and see our communities, but also the way we see the world. And as Native people, we oftentimes don't see a big difference between now and then, as it were. Oftentimes, there's this effort to separate those things to be like the past and the present. There is no difference between those places. Those places are all shared spaces. The people of old who are making things, the people who are making things now, share space with the people in the future, and those end up being really powerful things for us as people. Wanted to just share a little bit of those things and give a few words. I'm going to pass it to Sage, who's going to share a little bit of work and speak briefly, and then we'll go to Diego from there.
My art journey started, I like to joke that it started with Planet of the Apes. When I was in 6th grade, that was all I thought about. That was all I did. That was all I drew. Planet of the Apes. I lived and breathed Planet of the Apes. While I like to make that joke, it's not actually where my art journey started. Being able to be exposed to such art and interact with performance art and indigeneity in a way that many people don't get to do through my father and his occupations and the projects that he took on and the projects that I got to help on was really, really influential during that time. And as he showed, I was able to be a part of a lot of cool projects and a lot of cool performance pieces, whether that was painting and helping with murals or doing not traditional, but doing like performance pieces that were associated with missing and murdered Indigenous women, or even just like building a whole bunch of chairs for the one of the statues that he ended up making. And currently, as it stands, I am in my 2nd year of college pursuing an art practices degree at the University of Colorado, Denver. About sometime within the last year, I ended up having a bunch of health issues. And I don't say this to perpetuate a sort of sob story, but I say this to discuss intersectionality in the way that it exists with different cultures. I encountered a bunch of health issues that have progressively gotten worse over the last year that have impacted my ability to go to class and have impacted my ability to make art and have impacted just about every single facet of my life, which inherently makes me disabled. That paired with an Indigenous and a queer identity really influences every single aspect of the way that I see the world, and therefore influences every single aspect of the art that I make, and influences every single aspect of the things that I talk about and the things that I think about and the content that sits with me. I feel like a lot of people don't necessarily comprehend how prevalent that is, because in the same way that because I'm Indigenous, the art that I'm making is inherently Indigenous, because I'm disabled, the art that I'm making is inherently disabled, and because I'm queer, the art that I'm making is inherently queer. Along with that, and along with those physical problems, I haven't been able to make paintings as often as I would. And so all of these pieces that you see here are digital paintings that I still did with myself and my own materials and made with my own hands, but not necessarily with a paintbrush and paint. On the furthest side, we have Miss Levitt from Sweeney Todd, because I like Sweeney Todd. The middle is a piece that I did for my illustration class. And then on the far right is a painting of Cynthia Erivo, because she was in a performance that I really enjoyed. But along with all of those things impacting my identity, that also, like I said before, impacts the things that I enjoy. And I tend to make a lot of fan art because I enjoy a lot of things. And so all of these are related to the Rocky Horror Picture Show, because I like the Rocky Horror Picture Show, and it's also a place that I've found fosters a lot of community that I find to be very strong and very helpful throughout all of the things that I'm doing. Part of being a student, because only in my 2nd year, so I'm still chugging along through all of the introduction classes, is figure drawing, which is really, really fun. It allows me a space where I'm able to study anatomy and draw people. All of these illustrations were done in about 45 minutes each. Most of them are acrylic paint, 2 of them are digital pieces also, but being a student allows me to have space to just study and learn and not necessarily focus on making really, really solid final pieces, but instead focus on practicing and learning. Some other things that I've done, I do paint. I'm not able to paint as much as I would like to, but the piece on the very far left is a painting that I was commissioned to do of a character from a movie called Repo and the Genetic Opera. It's not a very good movie, but it's very entertaining. And I've, along with fostering community, have been able to do things such as design t-shirts for the Rocky Horror Picture Show in Denver. And on the far right is another illustration that I did for my figure drawing class. And then straight down the middle is a deer, which was part of a drawing that I did for my illustration class. And you might have found that through all of these pieces, I really enjoy portraits because I think that there's something beautiful just about people. And I also have found that I really like to draw deer, which is a whole other conversation. But I think is kind of an interesting motif that I'm allowed to explore within being a student. Now, I do have pieces in this show, which is really exciting, and so I wanted to save them for last. This is not one of the pieces in the show, but this is a piece that is associated with the other two pieces that I made in the show right here. And I made these a little bit ago. They're all acrylic paint. They were all different ways in which I wanted to work and explore indigeneity in the way that I understood it, because indigeneity is not this antiquated idea that is often put upon us in history classes and from strange little markets where strange little things happen. And so I wanted to explore indigeneity in a more contemporary manner. The piece on the left was my graduation cap from my high school graduation a couple years ago. And it has aspects of my culture. Was able to get 2 eagle feathers to attach to the top, and my father did the beading around the cap. On the other side was me trying to process and have a discussion about the way things look like when they're looking up. I was just about to move out of my house and start college, and I was working to process and foster and figure out like what the future held, and it was very, very exciting. This was a photography project that I did for my class, and around this time my health issues were informing the work that I was making as well. And I wanted to use the motif of a doll because a doll is inherently dehumanized, and there's something about being marginalized, just part of a marginalized group of people, that creates a really not great space for people to do that dehumanization. I wanted to explore that through these photos and through this process where I essentially made myself into a human doll and worked on this photography project to explain sort of those motifs in a more abstract manner. And that leads to the last piece that I had in this show, where I took another still from this project that I did and I painted it. And the background looks a little bit bonkers because this canvas did get run over by a car. And it also ended up embroidering on it and then ripping the embroidery off and writing things in it and then ripping it off just over and over and over, creating these layers and layers and layers before ending up on the final piece. And it is one of the most recent paintings that I've done, and something that I feel very excited about, that I'm really excited and grateful to be in this show surrounded by so many amazing and influential artists.
You're up, Diego.
Hey, what's up, y'all? Good evening. My name is Diego Uriel Flores Arroyo. I was born and raised here in Denver, Colorado. My dad, he's like Denver, and his family's like northern New Mexico, southern Colorado. My mom is from Juarez, born and raised, and her family is like from the Sierra de Chihuahua. Raramari people, Tarumaras, runners. So I'm indigenous to both sides of the border, and identify as a Chicano. I'm in this modern day and age, this time, so many people are assimilated and have stepped away. Previous generations have, stepped away from their cultures. My grandmother was the first person on my mom's side to speak Spanish and didn't teach my mom Raramari, and that's like our indigenous language there, And so aside from that, it's like like Greg was talking about, this is a trade route, all the way up from Alaska, all the way down to Argentina, and we as indigenous peoples reconnecting in an authentic way that is remembering and reconnecting to the land and like using these older ways to reconnect to each other too. I think part of it is this modern day and age has only tried to separate us and divide us in so many ways. So I want to just say thank you to Greg for including me in the show, and thinking about me in this way. I really appreciate that, because we try to carry our ceremonial ways and continue just living like that. That's just how I live. It's not even like an extra thing. It's just who I am. So it gets crazy in the United States with numbers and whatever, right? Blood quantum. Those things are fake anyways. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. So I'm a poet, artist, and musician by trade. That's what I do. If you were here at the beginning, you might have caught a poem or two. This image is an image from a play that I wrote. This play, we put it into production twice. The name of the play is Cuauhtemoc, and Cuauhtemoc was the last Tlatoani leader of the Mexica people in Tenochtitlan. The story is to connect the where did the spirit of the warrior go? When Hernan Cortez arrived, Montezuma, his son was murdered by Cortez, and after that he just broke down. The second person was Cuitlahuac. He got smallpox and died. And the third person was Cuauhtemoc. Cuauhtemoc was a young man. He was in his early 20s from Tlatelolco, and he quickly realized that they were not going to win the war in this battle, and that 500 years of darkness were going to come. And in that 500 years of darkness, we needed to hold our traditions and allow them to be protected by the walls of our community as well as the boundaries of our homes. And so people really just using those indigenous ways in their homes, because the drum was no longer able to be utilized. And so connecting that history with modern day. And so the byproducts of those 500 years of darkness are the prison school to prison pipeline, all these different things that we see: capitalism, colonialism. And so the story starts and follows a young man named Dante through his experience in prison. And we see his warrior spirit and his reconnection to his culture in isolation, in imprisonment. And so that's Cuauhtemoc. Here's another image from the work. In the last bit of the play, in his self-actualization, of his self-understanding, he has these dreams that are very mystical and surreal. We used projection and scrim to create 3D ethereal atmospheres. Here, the sister of Dante, Xochitl, is wearing Mexica danza regalia. And here is our main actor, Dante, as Cuauhtemoc in danza regalia as well. I'm also a painter, muralist. This was a collaboration down in San Luis in Centennial High School. The blue portion was made by a friend of mine, Carlos Martinez, down in San Luis, and the other portions were my contributions. It's important for me to make contributions to the South, like to places that don't always get the art. Denver is very saturated with art, which is a good thing, and but also to be able to share art with communities that don't have that like immense abundance. I feel like is such an honor and a blessing both ways, because you're one, for them to have it, but then for you to be received in the love, and for them to feel seen. So they're like, hey, like, thank you so much for coming over here, And in Denver, walls get painted over all the time, and this is something that I'm thankful to be able to give back to the community. So this was in collaboration with History Colorado, and the students went home and recorded oral histories of their families in San Luis. They came to school and met with Carlos, my friend and collaborator on this painting. And these are the ideas that they came up with. They drafted the mural historically, from the South, coming up, the Mexican Revolution, bringing the culture with them, and then the church, being interjected, and then the land itself, the Ordinal, the cornfields, Sacred Mountain, and then the Sangre de Cristo's there, and then the future, right? Industrial, but then also with the vehicle, but then the hummingbird as like the future, right? The hummingbird's the only bird that flies in all 7 directions, and so wherever we choose, right? This is a painting that was made in collaboration with the photographer named Anthony Mays. We did a show 2 years ago called You Amber, and it was a display of Chicanismo in this modern context of today, and like trying to not only pay homage to what has come before, but asking questions of where do we go next and why. And so this is a image of La Raza Park, a historical place for the Chicano movement. Lots of actions and history has taken place in the park, a neighborhood that my dad grew up in and I grew up in. I'm so really thankful to be able to do this. This is also when I started to play with things like this, where it's just, this is a 4 foot by 4 foot painting. And so As Greg said, we are Indigenous, but we are artists first. And so I take the technical ability and technical exploration very serious. And so here in the center is acrylic Posca paint markers for the hypersaturated portions. The second ring is golden acrylic, and then the third ring is latex paint to kind of give that chalkiness on a raw canvas. So this was also a painting that was part of the U Member show. And so kind of this was after the play, taking a year off from painting. I had painted 2 paintings in the course of writing and producing the play. This work was the first work that I worked on for that show. The previous painting we seen was the third painting. So really exploring like back into realism and just like trying to be loose but be tight too, have some fun. This was the final painting of the 4-piece series. So this work is called Girl with the Piñata, continuing to explore the periphery. How do you paint and express things that you're not looking at? So the top and the bottom are latex. The center portion is golden acrylic, and the 2 black and gray portion panels on the side are oil. And that's the only medium that was able to give me that soft of an edge. And so just trying to really utilize color. Also this painting using fluorescent colors in the face there to really give the luminance of the sun hitting it. Really some big breakthroughs in this painting. So really excited to share it with you all. Like I said, I'm a muralist. This was a painting I made last year in Pueblo along the Arkansas River. I am tied off on a climbing harness, and the ditch is like about a 45-degree angle pitch. And so artists are tied off, but are working towards a Guinness World Record for the longest consecutive mural. They had it once in the 90s, and now the levee was reconstructed and a portion of it was destroyed. So they are on their way back to getting back to having it. This is a painting, the very center portion up until like where the 4 keepers of the directions are. The clouds on the sides are digital, but the center portion is a painting. And so this is the center cover of our record. I'm in a band called Los Mocochetes. We've been a band for about 10 years now in the Denver community and playing regionally. And this is the center of our first 7-inch record. So the lyrics are overlaid over this. We play music, protest music that you can dance to is what we tell people. And a lot of times it sounds like Chicano funk. So this painting has a lot to do with what we were talking about of the connection of the North and the South. The eagle is a representation for the North. Quetzal is a representation for Central America. And then the condor here is a representation for South America. Here in the center, we have a symbol that's the Inlakesh, and that's the one with the purple. And the center portion is that hummingbird again. And so outside of that center circle, we have the Aztec calendar, the sunstone, the Tonapuali count. There's so many different equations and information about the universe as well as our existence, our planetary existence within it. And then outside, we see these 2 monarch butterflies that are flying in both directions. And so that's a metaphor for us from the north going to the south, and the south coming up to us, and having that exchange. In the 4 corners, we have the keepers of the directions, and the colors of those. The exterior, starting with the top left, is the keeper of the east. So that's where the sun rises, and then the north is in the top right, and then the west in the bottom right, and then the south in the bottom left. And so depending on the time of year is when the sun goes down and up. And so keeping that 1-day cycle as well as the thousands of years that the calendar counts. And right now are in the Buktan of the opportunity of the eagle and the prophecy of the eagle and the condor to come together. This is a painting that's right behind me. This is not a finished photo. I thought it was, but this is for Adams County Festival Latino. Wanted to show the connection to the indigeneity that Latinos have. The word Latino inherently disconnects us from these lands. and so really felt strongly to bring a Indigenous representation to the festival. Have people from all different parts of the Americas, Central and South America represented. This is a Sonoran deer dancer, a Yaqui deer dancer, and a yarn painting over a yarn painting. And this is a 8 foot by 8 foot painting on wood panel. This is currently some mock-up for a work that's going to Adams County. So this is to be painted. This is kind of like how my process looks before the paintings come to be. And so work digitally a lot of times and then actualize them with painting.
All right. My
So
name is
that's
Chelsea
basically
Kaya. I am a Ute and Apache. I'm from the Northern Ute Reservation, the UNO, Uinta and Ouray. And this piece is in the show, actually. And I found these vintage Spam cans that were not in Spam form. And so basically, I wanted to do this like quilted Spam photo frame. And then I did this really intricate Spam center where I used vintage crow beads from around the same time as the Spam cans. And it wiped out my stock of Sioux blue, but it's okay because I really, really love the vibrancy of this piece and like the patterning. It's just the color palette is very satisfying to me. This is an install that was done at Redline when I was still a resident for 2 years. You can see I have like bison horns on the pedestals, and you could actually put them up to your ear and listen to me whispering sweet nothings in prayer to the bison. And then the piece in the back right there on the tan is actually this piece. It's called Wallow. It's such a beautiful piece because it's actually a piece made from one of the female bisons that we had hunted. It's about the process of literally mourning the animal that you're hunting, but also being so grateful and feeling so connected to it as well. So there's that weird dynamic of hunting, of, you know, being sad that you're hunting, but also being very grateful for it. And also part of my like hunting process is documentation. I really, really love documenting it because I can then look back on photos like these that inspired this piece, Nuchu. It's such a great connection of like reality versus my artistic translation. And then, of course, Nuchu is about connecting to these ancestral skill works and really having it be present and a part of who you are. Recussant Ute in her absence. So you can see in this piece the porcupine quills. So they're going to be the quills and the white circles, and then the blue mask is also the porcupine quills. I'll hand dye and sort and clean all of these quills. It's very tedious work, but it's actually really fun. And then I did a residency at the Denver Art Museum in 2022, and it was really amazing because I was able to look at ancestral items and then kind of reference them later in work. So you can kind of see me referencing some of the same patterning, or just even layering red felt with hide work. And this piece, Choke Cherry Eyes, is also in the exhibition. And I love showing people the process. So all the stitching that goes into beating a piece like this and constructing it, and then finally like the final product. And then this is also an install at Redline. This sculptural piece is made out of over 1,000 porcupine quills. So the blue, the pink, and the yellow orange is all hand-dyed porcupine quills. And then this is actually in the DU University Permanent Indigenous Collections. You can kind of see the porcupine quills a little bit better. I suspend them between this metal armature and then tack them onto the leather, the hide. And then this piece is also in the exhibition hanging in the window. It's called Tracking Time. This was at the Boulder Museum of Contemporary Art. This piece specifically is obviously based off from the patchy saddlebag that I had shown earlier, but I call it my Indian stained glass because I think it's just like such a stunning piece, very simple, and sometimes having these reused and very simple projects end up being my favorite. I use a lot of tarp and reuse like really old items as part of that show. Yeah, so you can see the saddlebag. This is also another piece where I reuse some materials and laser engraved land back into this piece because my tribe had just tried to acquire a parcel of land in Utah. They actually offered more than what the government was asking for, and the government still went with another buyer because, Utah. And then I also acquired taste for documentation, video work, and then what do I do with all of that? And so I actually kind of do these really funky video pieces that are more ephemeral and textural and just kind of going through the processes of what I actually do and the motions for making hide work. And then in 2024/2025, I have been working on my Social Impact Award, which awarded me $50,000. $15,000 I pledged to do a socially engaged art project within the Denver metro area. It was honestly something that I had been working towards for about 3 or 4 years of wanting to connect hide work better to the Denver metro area as well as to the Indigenous community. And so June of this year, I was able to do just that. So I showed how to go from the very beginning of hide work to the very end of a finished smoked hide. And I actually worked with Denver Parks and Rec, and they would call me up and say, hey, we have a deer that was like hit, or we have a mountain lion that a farmer shot. Do you want to reharvest their hides? Else then they would just go in pits. So I was able to get a few more hides for the hide camp and repurpose the animals that kind of usually just go to waste in the Denver area. So that was just such a dream come true of being able to work within the community and give back to the community, because I think that's a really beautiful connection to have when you're an artist and you're an Indigenous person, is having this balance of community, art, working with museums, building your own art practice, and then really kind of digesting all of these subjects that you can really work within being in the art community. And so I'm just really grateful for everyone here and all the artists, and thank you so much for listening.
Hello, everyone. Thank you to Chelsea. I love Chelsea's work so much, so being able to see it in person was like an out-of-body experience. Like, your beadwork is so intricate and like amazing. So thank you for those beautiful offerings just now in that presentation. Thank you all for coming. I just wanted to first extend my gratitude to everyone here, and of course Greg Deal for inviting me to be a part of this exhibition and the Fort Collins Art Museum. I'm really honored to be displayed with all of these amazing artists, and yeah, I'm really grateful to be here. In my presentation, I'm going to be introducing you to my work and of course talking about the works that are specifically in this exhibition, and talking about my concepts, my materials, my sketches, and just my overall process. Again, for my artist introduction, I'll be going over my background and my artist statement. Hello again, my name is Sky Little Cloud. I am a Samoan, Dakota, and Kickapoo interdisciplinary artist, and my practice centers Indigenous feminisms and Indigenous women mainly. Right now, I'm an undergraduate sophomore at Pratt Institute in Brooklyn, New York. I'm currently studying for my Bachelor in Fine Arts in painting and also minoring in museum and gallery practices. My work has been exhibited in the Capitol Building in Washington, D.C., the Denver Art Museum, a part of the yearly Indomitably Indigenous exhibit, now the Fort Collins Museum, and other smaller centers as well. And I also just recently curated an exhibition entitled Modern Matriarch Knowledge Keepers at the Creative Nations Gallery in Boulder. And that was a big exhibition for me as well. That was really exciting. Again, my work mainly centers Indigenous women. I specifically think that the experiences of Indigenous women are very momentous as we face a post-colonial patriarchal world. And returning to Indigenous knowledge is at the core of my practice while emphasizing the beauty of Indigenous women, it's my principal priority in my practice, my painting practice, and my curatorial practice. When I'm thinking about painting my subjects, I'm focusing on healing, empowerment, and again, highlighting the beauty of Indigenous women and just supporting my sisters and my fellow matriarchs. Here are the two pieces that are in the exhibition. The one on the left is entitled Serpentine Bloom, and the one on the right is Introspective Bloom. They're both a part of my ongoing Bloom series, where I am depicting feminine subjects. The purpose of this series is to call attention to how many Indigenous tribes are traditionally matriarchal and follow a matrilineage, and wanting to return to that knowledge, that traditional knowledge, and respecting our Native women and respecting our elders in general. So in these two pieces, they can be displayed alone, but as you can see, I personally really like when they are displayed together because they empower one another, they complement one another, and ultimately they support one another, which is what I aim for in my work. And I aim to highlight the interconnected network of matriarchs that Indigenous women have and just appreciate the women in my life and my sisters and fellow matriarchs and my mentors and all the people in my life who inspire me are mainly two-spirit and feminine individuals. And I think it's also very important to highlight Indigenous feminism because the patriarchy still instills our tribes today as well. And Native women experience lots of domestic violence, more so than other women. So I think it's important to refocus our attention to healing and caring for one another and caring for our fellow sisters and just remembering that the people in your life that really got you are the woman and two-spirit in your life. So that was my initial concept for making these works. They're both 30 by 48 and they're in acrylic paint. I completed each of them with around like a week or 2 weeks, and I actually created the one on the right first before moving on to the one on the left. So the one on the right displays like the relationship between the two women. I think that in my mind, they're sisters, but they could also share a different like auntie relationship, however you want to interpret it. The way that I was approaching my canvas was with playfulness and with gestural mark making. My biggest critique last year from my professors was that I was too much a perfectionist and I was trying to get really tight with my subjects and with my painting. With these pieces, I wanted to explore more gestural mark making and just play. I've never used palette knife work before, so it was really exciting to just have that element of chaos and randomness of not really knowing exactly where everything was going to go. Because in my previous paintings, I would map out where every single element would be. Whereas with these pieces, I really tried to let go, as my professor told me. Again, allowing for that chaos and randomness, I want to embrace the parts of ourselves that we don't usually deem as perfect. I think women face a lot of criticisms on just the way that we look, the way that we act, and in general, the way that we are, when Native women are multifaceted, dynamic beings that are never going to be pinned down to one specific image or stereotype. I wanted to carry that sentiment into my painting and literally let myself go with the mark making. All of these flora elements were not planned. They were simply created as I was painting in the studio. Also tying in an architectural element because I grew up in the Bronx and I grew up away from my traditional homelands, tying in that urban native experience into the flora, into the identity piece was really important to me and trying to make these ideas as cohesive as I can make them. And I'm really happy with how they turned out. They look really great in the exhibition and I'm really happy to have them displayed. If you have any other questions for me, you could follow me on Instagram. I'm open to DMs and also my shop. If you want to see more of my work, you could go to my website at Little Cloud Studio, and the QR code just links to my website and the shop that has both of the works in prints, big prints and smaller prints on it. But again, thank you so much to Greg Deal and to the Museum of Art at Fort Collins. And thank you to everyone here for listening.
Yoali, me llamo Alicia Trujillo. I go by Osomali Xochitl as my Mexica name, and I also go by Bruce Trujillo, which you can see on my screen here. So call me any of those. I will answer to all of them. I am a mixed heritage, detribalized queer Chicana from Denver, Colorado. I am traditionally a painter, and my day job is actually within the music industry. I have a background in non-commercial radio. I also own and run a music venue in Aurora, Colorado called Manos Sagrados, which is actually kind of where I'd like to kick things off. I'll start off with the name. If you're a native Spanish speaker, you know that is grammatically incorrect. It should be Manos Sagradas. But as a queer person and as somebody who has traditional Mexican heritage, I really wanted to play with the genderization of the Spanish language as a colonizer language within these lands. And so it really upsets a lot of people who are native Spanish speakers, but it's trying to create a statement and trying to create conversation. The name came from a limpia or traditional energetic cleansing that I received from a woman in Bernalillo, New Mexico. Her name is Siwatli Siwat. She is one of our ancestors. She passed under my hands with the smoke medicine and asked if I was an artist without knowing anything about me. And I said, yeah, I am. And she said, yes, you have a lot of stories to tell. You have sacred hands. And so that's kind of become my North Star after that happened. And from here, I'm going to share my screen. This is actually the logo that I created for my business, for the music venue. It's two hands that have stars coming out of it. And that just represents a couple of different things within what I'm doing at the venue, but also within my work, where it's spotlighting the work of other artists and what I'm doing, and then also supporting. And so we'll kind of come back to this here in a few, but I wanted to go over some of the paintings that I have in the exhibit. This first one is called Bring Them All Back. This is the first in a 4-part series that explores missing and murdered Indigenous relatives. And I wanted to explore the 4 parts of our communities that are impacted, and that begins with our children. Of course, we know the history of Indian training schools or residential schools, and I like to really play a lot with these images of Native folks being dramatized, a lot of these things that you'll see in Disney films. So we see water lily or tiger lily from Peter Pan. The young boy is Hathawaya or Hiawatha. And so by creating caricatures of our people, they become less real, they become less important, it becomes a joke, it becomes something that can be just tossed out. And as you'll see, neither of these kids have mouths. Their voices were literally taken from them. One of the things when we say bring them all back is, we're still finding mass grave sites in a lot of these residential schools. And so having the hummingbird in between the two of them is literally calling back that spirit back home. And, the hands are something that you're going to see in almost all of my paintings and almost all of my works. And those are placed usually in gold or in another vibrant, bright color. And then this is also a picture from a residential school actually up in Washington. My background, I grew up on the western slope of Colorado and went to college in Grand Junction. There is a residential school, the Teller School, and there are unmarked graves up in that area of the world. And so I didn't know about this until I hit college, until I was taking an Indian studies class. I knew that kids were taken away. I knew part of the story, but I didn't know that there were unmarked graves until I was well into college. And it was just pretty shocking, especially growing up, going to powwows and being a small part of what I did as a kid. So this is the first part of that series. The second part is how 1619 to present. This started off as a piece with that Pocahontas down at the bottom. Again, her mouth is taken away, and then that juxtaposition with the black snake. I've heard a couple of different stories with how the black snake is represented within missing and murdered Indigenous women and relatives. One as the literal roads that are covering the land that we're currently standing on, but also the oil and gas industry. And so also growing up on the Western Slope, going to Rifle High School, seeing all of the oil wells along Battlement Mesa and throughout that space, and knowing that with that much space in between the oil wells and civilization, and generally also being on reservations or stolen lands, a lot of women also go missing. You'll see the red hand on Pocahontas that has become a symbol for our missing and murdered Indigenous women, the red hand specifically over the mouth. And then again, that caricature up top, that comes from a Looney Tunes, Bugs Bunny cartoon. The question is, how did this begin? Pocahontas was our first missing and murdered Indigenous woman. She was taken, when she was 16, 17. It wasn't the Disney version where she fell in love with this white man who was 20 years older than her. Moving on, we have those olders there in that good way. I decided not to go with a caricature for this one. I just wanted to pay respect and homage to a lot of our different elders. And so the hands here are aged a little bit different. They carry a lot of knowledge with them, but the layers within this piece show a lot of different symbolism for what we consider our grandfathers, including you can kind of see it's dark, the stones in the middle. These are what we use within Sweat Lodge, and the rocks, the stones are the oldest thing on the planet, so they carry the most knowledge, and that's why we pray with them and we revere them. Next are the trees, and then in the middle is tobacco flowers, and so we offer that tobacco for the wisdom that we get from our relatives throughout different ceremony. The final one that I created was Inherent Connection, Save the Man, Kill the Indian. I was going to do a caricature piece of this. There are plenty out there, but instead I actually chose this very real person. He was a Dene person who was taken to a residential school. These photos were taken 3 years apart. So in the photo, you see his hair is just surrounding him. But of course, they cut off that hair. And within 3 years, he is this very dapper looking man about town. But those braids, especially for our men, are the connection back to the womb, back to our mother, back to our people. And so you see the baby with the umbilical cord that turns into a braid going down, and then coming back up is a braid of sweetgrass that connects back into that child. Those hands are holding that womb space with our turtle in the middle. These pieces were created just before I was invited into this show. I had worked on it just as a way to kind of process and learn a little bit more about how this is really impacting different parts of our community. One of the things that I also do in the rest of my life, I'm a prayer runner with the Nawiolene Prayer Runners here in Denver, which is in the spirit of the Peace and Dignity Run and Sand Creek Massacre Run. And so we run around Denver at the turn of each season for a different part of our community, honoring the men in the East, the children in the South, the women in the West, and the elders in the North. So praying for their good health, for praying for those ancestors, praying for healing is really what it is. But also every May 5th, around that time, we go into Southern Ute Territory down in Ignacio, Colorado, and they do a walk for MMIR, and we run with them and then behind them. And so this was our third year this past year, and so these pieces kind of came out of that. The other pieces within the show, the exhibit, include Mariposita, which is inspired after peyote ceremony and the traditional medicine that my partner and I partake in our community. And so, the blue deer is part of that medicine. And this was just inspired after our latest meeting and kind of the beauty and the vision seen within that, carrying on those traditions. Mis Hermanas is for the three sisters, corn, bean, squash. This was kind of just a quick one that I did, but I really, really love it. It's actually the background on my phone, really celebrating how the earth really provides in all of these different ways for us, whether that's the medicine or the food or housing, or we really are not living in lack. We have everything that we need, and I think the three sisters are really exemplify that. The last piece that's in the exhibit is Tiawi, which is a Nahuatl word for forward. And so this is actually a gift that I'm planning on giving my tío, who leads the Nawiolene Spirit Runners. The prayer runs are seen throughout the Americas, and he is a lifelong runner. He really dedicates himself to running. And so showing traditional runners with the chanclas and these different ways that people run throughout the Americas, showing together the eagle and the condor. Diego kind of talked about that earlier this evening. So really bringing together the spirit of Northern Indigenous folks and Southern Indigenous folks. And the story goes that when those two fly in the sky together, the native peoples of the continent of the hemisphere will be brought together. In addition to painting, I do a couple of other things. Oh, yeah, I'm going to show you some of the more recent paintings that I've done as well. So you'll see there's a lot of layering within my painting, and I like to do that to bring attention to different pieces. So you might be drawn first to the hands or to the very dark blacks within this piece.
How's it going? My name is Stephen Yazzie. Howdy. I am Navajo Laguna Pueblo. I was born in California, but raised on the Navajo Reservation, the northwestern region of Arizona, in places called Lachee and Black Mesa, near Kayenta, and also near Page and in Page, Arizona. I kind of grew up around the Southwest, in the Southwest, and a lot of my work tends to going back to kind of Navajo land, sometimes Laguna, as references to and just kind of touch points to my kind of my cultural background, and also land as a source of story, of conflict, of healing. It carries a lot of different meanings for me throughout my work. I know we're coming up or at 7:30, so I'm going to just briefly go through a few things just to give a context of like the work I've done over time. Well, first off, thank you, Greg, and thank you for everybody for the invitation. And thank you to all the other artists, the younger artists that are just making some incredible works. And I'm just so happy to see the kind of the evolution of practice through these young makers and thinkers and visionaries. So I'm thrilled to be sharing space with you all. I'll touch on just a few works to like I said, just to show you, kind of introduce you into some of the other works that are related to my practice. Coyote has been a big part of a series of work I started in 2008, but this is one of a few paintings of one of a diptych that I did a few years back. Nature doesn't give a shit about you, but it's sure nice to look at. And it's one of the first times I introduced like the human form. Usually they are paintings that have the showing the remnants of our kind of utopian spaces or ideal spaces. A lot of mid-century modern or things that have interested me in terms of architecture and history, but also the idea of like coyote both as a creature of adaptation, but also playing in that role of as the trickster or the transgressive character within Navajo or Dene culture. So a few of these. This is Death of the Curator #3. So that you can imagine there's a few of them, and this is just that museum space being reclaimed and taken over by coyote. Drawing and Driving is one of the works that I've been doing since 2000 or working on since 2006. And I'll just play a little bit in the background so you can kind of get a sense of this project. But it's really about movement, about moving through land, body through space. May not play on here, but the idea of this project was to connect myself to the technology of travel. And from a bike, I can add an easel, or the speed of technology, the speed of our life sometimes, but also trying to capture the land, and as we're moving through it, and the kind of the impossibility of capturing something perfect and allowing the vehicle to be part of the process. That technology is a few examples of that. Some work I did drawing here in Denver. I live here in Denver. I've been here for about 8 years. There's some other works that were done around the Hayman Fire area. I try to take this project to, culturally or personal or some kind of like a location that has some significance. The Hayman Fire area, I learned when I was working on this project or on this series, that it was at the time I did the work, it was a 20-year anniversary of this significant wildfire that happened here in Colorado that I became aware of. And some of you who are from here or live here maybe know the history of this, but it was a location that became the call to arms for climate change. Gold King and Associates is a community collaborative kind of site-specific installation piece. It takes the form of a real estate sign, and it's called Gold King and Associates. And it may look like a place that's for sale, but if you call the number, you can listen to a range of voices, both native and non-native voices that are recounting or telling stories about their relationship to land and place. And so the message, it's a 60-second audio message that I rotate out. So you can even call this number now or anytime in the future if you're on my website. And occasionally I'll be able to activate this and bring it into the land. And I've placed these signs in a number of places throughout Denver. This is a list of some of the names, the collaborators in the project, but it's an ongoing project, ongoing piece. It finds life, sometimes in other parts of Colorado. I think it's going to travel this next year out of the region. This piece is called Elders, and it was in an exhibition at MCA 2 years ago. It is a piece, it's a reconstructed tree form made out of 12 different species of tree from the state of Colorado. And it also includes 12 different voices, indigenous voices, audio excerpts from interviews that I've done over a number of years when I've had a chance to work with or interview or be a part of conversations with our elders. So the audio is kind of woven together from these different stories, and it plays over the top of this tree form. The tree is pieced together. The tree form is put together, like a Lego set. And it comes apart and it travels, kind of pretty well. But it's meant to look like a fallen tree, a fallen dead tree. And I am using dead branches and limbs, but hearing the stories of Native people playing over this form evokes this kind of, I think, for the listener and the viewer, this sense of connection to the natural world, to these stories can be pretty meaningful. Some of the work in the exhibition. This is an example of some of the painting that's in our current show. This is called Flux Abyss. This is not in the exhibition, but it's an example of the kinds of work that I was, the 4 paintings that are in the show. This work, it's imagined, it all comes out of the imagination and comes out of kind of the idea of like meandering and creating mistakes and resolving them, and painting in a different way where I'm not using a photo reference or something literal or specific. And it really is a non-narrative work, but it's about the kind of, the movement of and the transformation of the earth and land, and how, we are living on this world that is constantly changing, and the, geologic time is very different than our own. But there's the idea in this work is to kind of, I try to capture something that feels like a natural place or form, whether it's a tree or rock or flora, and create it in a way that allows it to look like, or it looks like it's maybe falling apart or coming together or in this state of transformation. And movement, again, is another, maybe a through line, with this work. This is some of the other work, some of the other examples of that. And this is a relatively new series for me. It's ongoing, and I've been back in the studio painting a lot lately, so it's been really, really fun to get into it. iDazzler is like my most recent 2-channel video. I think we have it on a single channel in the exhibition. Played a little bit in the background, but I've been traveling back to the Navajo reservation and places I grew up, because they're meaningful for me, and they carry a lot of history. So this video piece is really about kind of unearthing those geometries that are embedded in the land. So if the abstraction on the left, floats in and out, it cuts to different side, left and right. But you'll notice that I shot this with a drone. So and I discovered this by accident. But as I was kind of floating or flying up and doing this documentation in the land, and I repeated this, and it created this this geometry that reminded me of the iDazzler rug design. And so it continued on this whole northern region I was filming, also in these areas that were very significant to, or that held these uranium deposit location cells. And there's been a lot of that activity, on native land, and in particular, from my experience, or my understanding, over 500 different abandoned uranium mines currently today. So there's a lot of that kind of like pensive texture in the land. The sound, even the sound in the piece is distorted field recordings, from the journey and the travel there. But it's a looping panel, or looping 2-channel installation with variable kind of parameters in terms of installation. It could be on a single channel TV. It could be with multiple projections. But as you can see on the right, there's an example of the iDazzler that emerges. So those last 2 examples are works that are examples that are in the exhibition. I know we're at 7:42, so I don't want to be too long. And I just want to say thank you so much for the opportunity to share tonight, and have a good evening. Thanks.
Thank you to Greg, and thank you to all of our artists who are in the exhibition and who are in the Zoom tonight. The exhibition is up through January 3rd, so if you haven't come to see it, we have it up for another 6 weeks or so. Again, thank you, everyone, and hopefully we'll see you at the museum soon. Take care.